What we're going to talk about today, the title of my talk is Drawing Attention. That is also the title of a small workshop that I give. Here, I gave it at OpenGrounds, and I'll be giving it again at the end of February. It's a 90-minute workshop that really is a distillation of my beginning drawing course that I teach. And that's what I'm going to talk to you today about, what happens in that course and what happens in the workshop. One of the things also that drawing attention is, I'd like to address, is it's what contemplation does. So I'd like to shift the focus of attention from what contemplation is to actually what it does and what it can do for us and with us, individually and culturally. Drawing, for me, drawing is kind of like a koan. And you might be familiar with that word, koan. It's a Zen Buddhist practice that you might be familiar with the what is the sound of one hand clapping. The original koan, by the way, is what is the sound of one hand. The word clapping was introduced several centuries later for Western audiences. But the original koan is what is the sound of one hand. And there are answers to koans. Those answers are demonstrated in front of the teacher. They're not discussed. They're not an intellectual exercise. It's an act of demonstration, of realization and recognition. And that's what happens in a drawing practice. And that's what I try to encourage in my classes also and in the workshop, is how do we recognize ourselves? And what are the processes that we use to recognize ourselves? The other thing that happens is that there's an integration then of being and doing. Again, let's have contemplation not as an observation technique, but a participation technique. One of the other issues when we use the word drawing, and sometimes I can actually feel it in the audience too, I don't know how to draw. That's actually the first reaction. I don't know how to draw. That's too hard. I don't know how to do it. I'm not good at it. And usually what happens is that impulse is from a very early memory. It might have been a kindergarten teacher that said you didn't trace your hand right when you did the Thanksgiving turkey, and you were criticized for that. Now, what happens in the workshop and in my classes is that wherever that message was given to you and was imprinted, that's how you will start drawing again. So if you were given that message when you were 6 or 7 or 8, and you take the workshop or you take a course when you're 70, you will start drawing as if you were 6 or 8 or 10. So what the workshop does, and what I try to do in my classes, is examine and recognize that imprint. And how can that imprint start to be released? And it comes from recognition. That first recognition of what am I doing? How am I seeing this? So even in the classes, and I'll show you some students' work, the question changes not from am I doing this right, but how am I seeing this? And that's a very different frame of reference to have. So I have here an Escher print, and you all heard about etchings, and I can talk to you about etchings if you wish. But one of the things I'd like to show you is how I start the workshop or how I start these drawing classes. And Fred is here, who took the drawing workshop, so you can grill him and ask him about it. Lindsay also took it. But we start with very, very simple materials. We start with pencil and paper. The less intimidating the materials are, the easier there is to access the information. So very, very simple. And we also start with line. So I was interested in the synesthesia presentation earlier, and also the meditation presentation we just had, because you're going to hear very similar vocabulary from me in how that's activated in drawing. So line is this first impulse. I tell my students that learning to draw is learning to see, and it's also learning a language. So when we first were born, we didn't come with complete sentences, at least I didn't, maybe some of you did, but I made sounds. And that line is the first sound. It's that first impulse. So I'm just going to show you a couple of, this is towards me, is that correct? The
pull down, yeah.
The pull down. Down. Hello. Down. There. These are some first drawings from students. These are freshmen, UVA calls them first year students. They've had little or no training when they come to my class. So these are first year students, 18, 19. And the agency starts from the very onset because I have them pick the object that they're going to draw. So automatically there's a sense of responsibility and accountability. It's not, I'm telling you what to draw, I'm asking you, which is the first thing I say in class, draw what you see. And that's all I say, draw what you see. So for the first few minutes of class, down, there is an enormous amount of tension in the class. And students can sit still for maybe 4 minutes, maybe 4.5 minutes. And then squirming starts and anxiety starts, and you can feel it in the room, it's palpable. People start strangling their pencils, and their shoulders start to go up, and they stop breathing. And all of that happens because of that intimidation of, I'm in a drawing class, I don't know what I'm doing, what does that mean, draw what I see. So here's another example. And I'd like you to pay attention too to how these drawings occupy the space. This is an 18 by 24 tablet, so it's about this big. And you can see how the images are centrally located. They're small. They don't occupy the area completely. And they're tentative. There's a tentativeness there. As we move on in the class, we get a little bit more complicated, a little bit more activity happens. I'm sorry, I'm not used to this. A little bit more volatility, a little bit more velocity in the line, a little bit more occupying of the space happens. A little bit more recognition of an object. And remember, that's not, the goal of the class is not a photographic representation of an external object. That's usually what we think of when we think of a drawing class, is I'm going to represent what is in front of me photographically. The goal of my class and the workshop is I want you to represent yourself to yourself. So it's not about an external activity and a representation of an external object. It's about that recognition of one's own state and how that's manifested in drawing. So then we move on to these. These are first year students. They've never drawn before, or they've had very, very little training. And there's some examples of these drawings outside in the other hallway. So, and these are 22 by 30 inches, so they're a little bigger. The materials are charcoal. And again, look at the techniques. These are first year students. And by this time, as you might recall, I said in the first class, 4 minutes brings about a lot of anxiety and tension. These drawings are done in a classroom for hours. Or an hour and a half class, several times a week. These take 2 weeks of an hour and a half per class, twice a week. But there's no music in the class. The students then are able, and I time them because I'll say, all right, we'll start this project by this time. And an hour goes by and they can't believe an hour has gone by. with no interruption, no anxiety, and they can see their own progress throughout their other courses. Their grades improve. They use the earlier techniques that I've talked about in class before job interviews to relax and calm down and stay focused, just like we did earlier with the meditation technique. And it's something you can do if you get anxious when your plane is delayed. Instead of getting angry at the agent, you just sit down and do a small drawing. And all of a sudden, everything just is, that recognition and stabilization becomes manifest. Here's a couple more drawings. First year. I mean, aren't they incredible? I'm so proud of these students. It makes me cry. I'm so proud of them. Well, let's go. Shall we? So that whether the object is recognizable or not, it's still, a pattern, a technique of concentration. Amazing, right? Amazing. So some of you might be familiar with this because one of the things we talk about when we're doing these contemplative exercises is it's all about slow and slow. And contemplation doesn't require slowness, it requires attention. And that's one of the things that we do in the class is do very, very fast drawings, extremely fast drawings. Some of you might even be familiar with what this is as a sketch. This is not from a student, but it is a first impulse of a site, S-I-T-E, that was seen by Frank Gehry. So that drawing that you just saw, if I know how to go backwards, I'll be amazed. If I don't. That, Frank's first impulse when he went to Bilbao, went to the site, that's it. That took, when Frank said it took maybe about 20 seconds, and he saw it. He saw it manifested, and then became Bilbao. So what I do in my class, and if we can in the workshop, we do these are full-size figure drawings. These are a repetition of drawing. Every drawing, this is the full size of the student, the page is cut to their size. And the model takes different poses for anywhere between 30 seconds and 1 minute. And when I can, I do a drawing marathon, which is 90 drawings in 90 minutes. And by the end of that 90 minutes, that thinking mind, that derisive mind has dropped. Their shoulders and arms have probably dropped too, but they're actually seeing and being simultaneously. And here's a view of a whole show that there's a similar show up now in the Ruffin Gallery, in the Ruffin building, the art building, of just the recent drawings that I did with students on Monday. And that is, what I wanted to talk about was that difference of, let's talk about paying attention when we talk about contemplation. And one of the things that I've noticed when we have conferences like this or symposia like this is that there's a lot of references of non-Western traditions. But there certainly are many, many examples in the West of contemplative practices. Trappist monks, for example. But one of the earliest things that I refer back to actually is from the Old Testament. And it's the first time we hear God speak. And he actually is asking a question. And that is kind of close to my heart of my tenet of inquiry and not indoctrination when I'm teaching. So the question he's asking, he, she, God, is asking Adam. And God asks Adam, Adam, where are you? It's not that God doesn't know where Adam is. It's that Adam doesn't know where Adam is. And I believe that drawing answers that question. Thank you. Hi, Jody. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, not like God, but hi.
Hi. You started with draw what you see without instruction, I assume.
Exactly.
And then the next drawings you showed us were contour drawings.
Right.
So I would guess that you gave some instruction before they started those contour drawings. Could you tell us how you introduced that technique?
Well, I want to, maybe you can talk about what a contour drawing is, because that's a very sophisticated vocabulary, and I'm not sure everyone knows what that means.
Do you want to turn back to a slide so they can see?
If I knew how to do that, I would.
Look at you.
Flipping through.
How about it? Okay, that's kind of a, well, that's not really a contour drawing, but that's maybe the next one. There's kind of a contour drawing.
Okay,
but that's,
so the student has the object in front of him, and the way I learned it is the artist fixes his eye at one point on the object.
Exactly.
And puts his pencil on the paper and thinks of his pencil point being in exactly where his eye is.
that is correct.
And slowly he moves his eye along the edges of the object as the hand moves at the same pace on the paper. And you keep your eye on the object the entire time the pencil's drawing. And some people have blind contours, so you never look at your paper.
That's a
And
blind contour.
I stop to reposition. So I've gotten to some place. I don't know where I am.
Not in my class.
See, I've finished school, so I can modify it
All right.
the way I want to. But anyway, that's what a contour drawing is: drawing while you're watching the object. Going slowly.
Well, and there are, thank you for that. That was wonderful. You get an A. But there are differences in being blind contour is that you don't look at your paper at all. And you are focusing, and what I ask my students is to make a commitment. It's a commitment that they are fully aware of where they are looking on that object and how that is in relationship to their pencil. And sometimes, even though this never happens at UVA, if there's a tendency of cheating, which never happens here, I ask my students to put a paper on top of where they're drawing, so they purposefully won't look. Again, the goal is not the representation of the object. The eye is the gas pedal or the brake. So the eye, in those gesture drawings, the velocity of the eye is what creates the movement. In the blind contour and the contour drawings, it's that slowness and very, very slow and paying attention. But with that, also, there has to be a sense of openness and relaxation. Because usually what happens in drawing is that before people use keyboards like crazy, they actually went like this to draw something and write. And that tendency of strangling the pencil or not breathing, or that shoulder going right up to the shoulder, is a habit that we can change. And that's the blind contour and contour drawings are the exercises that are very easily reproduced in times of stress, to eliminate that stress, to alleviate that stress. As I tell my students before a job interview, if they go on a heavy date, just relax, just draw. And that synchronicity of looking and seeing helps that integration, because that's what we're really looking for, is an integrated life and a creative life. Whether my students go on to become artists or not, that's really not up to me. I'm interested in that integrated and creative life. Any other comments or questions? I think I'm being shooed away.
So I invite you all to continue your conversations with Barbara in the other room. We are going to transition to our next presentation. We'll take a short break, and then we'll have Jordan Love and Marcia Childress presenting about the clinician's eye. Let me remind you that in the other In this room here, we have a performance, student-led performance, if you want to sit down at the table and join that. We also have a number of projects on display in the other room and people there to explain them to you. And at the back of the other space, the Phillips collection has, you can take the audio tour version of the guided viewing of Luncheon at the Boating Party. So we'll be back in here in about 5 minutes.
Thank you all very much.